Good morning, Misfits. Thank you for tuning into another episode of the Misfit Podcast. Holy shit, boys. It is open prep season, finally.
It's back.
Fuck.
How excited are you, bro?
Remember the
Thursday night?
last time we did this like open prep season? It was after like
Was that
it
when
was
the
like
Mayflower sailed?
It was like, oh, here's the open, but you also did an open like 3 weeks before that, and now it's been like a year and a half.
Yeah, that's weird. It is kind of, it does make sense though that this piece of shit year doesn't have an open.
Yeah,
right?
For real.
Fair.
Like it's,
that'll
it's
get-
basically
that gets-
still
that gets-
March.
That gets to kick you in the nuts in 2021.
I can't add that on top
Start
of this
that
pile.
right off.
We had 9 Marches.
9. Yeah.
As far as I know, it's still March.
Now it's December after all the marches.
Like
and
2
it's,
weeks away from Christmas.
yeah, makes sense. We're going to start open prep right around Christmas, and we're going to say bye to 2020. And 2021 has the potential to be a somewhat normal year.
Fucking shape up 2021. Shape up.
Yeah, we'll see.
Yeah.
Hold my breath.
So this podcast is all about open prep. If you are used to listening to our episodes where we sort of have a specific topic or we have a guest, what makes these podcasts somewhat different is we talk about what we think anyone needs to do inside of our program, outside of our program to get ready for the open. And then we nerd out a little bit on the specifics. One of the ways that we've sort of moved away from just going specific by like line by line by line, this is what we're doing, this is what we're doing, good luck, we'll see you later, is we have the Phase 9 guide and Phase 9 weekly check-in available for download. And you'll be able to see when those are available if you follow us on social at Misfit Athletics. And basically, if you like to nerd out on what the program is all about, we create a guide for you to be able to go through and say, okay, these are the lifts that we're focusing on. You know, these are the energy systems. This is what the test looks like. Why are we doing this and this? And then what I consider to be much more important is the weekly check-in, where you have all of the tests from test week listed out. We have our, the first time, what you got during test week, and then you put a goal below that, and then you put your score in week 7 for retesting.
And to me, this makes a lot of sense because a lot of athletes, again, try to use just 5 weeks a year to look at a workout, reevaluate what their strategy was, and then try to put a new strategy in place or to change their, the way they attacked it. But this is something you should practice year round. So like the weekly check-in is just an opportunity to get in the habit of, all right, like here's what I have coming up for the week. Here's what I did. Here's what I learned from it. And here's how I'm going to attack it next time. And it's just a behavior that it does take a little bit to buy into and get used to. But if you do buy in, you're going to have so much to learn from this. And that's the part that we really want to get out into athletes' heads is that like training is an experience and you can learn a lot of things. And those lessons happen year round, not just the 5 weeks that the opens, going on. It's the entire year. So let's start building those behaviors early on so that just becomes second nature, Second nature.
Yeah, I think the check-in guide I think is cool, especially for open prep when you've got kind of that like the win or the learn column. Always good to reflect on that sort of thing mentally. But as we get closer to the open, a lot of that can come down to the specifics and like the nuts and bolts of a workout, like understanding that I can row 20 calories in a minute forever. I can row, if you're a dude, or 15 calories if you're a woman. Having that sort of information. So obviously always good to reflect kind of on the more like ethereal, like how I was feeling sort of thing. But also it's open prep is a really good time to be dialing in things like actually paying attention to, yes, I can do a set of 8 chest to bar pull-ups no matter what. If I'm dying, if I have 8 seconds left in the workout, I can do a set of 8, that sort of thing. So, and those are the kinds of things that can shuffle you up and down the leaderboard of 10, 20, 100 places. So check-in guide, more valuable than just kind of like the mental notes as well.
Absolutely. And then the final piece here is our progress bar at the bottom. This, to me, as a metaphor for mindset, is wildly important. We have the most consistent group of people on earth. Like if you're listening to this podcast, there's a pretty good chance you are one of the most consistent people on earth. You follow the blog 52 weeks a year. It's like, okay, this is the thing that I do. Check, 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 check. You go down. But then we lose sight of the progress, and we lose sight of, why didn't I did this Metcon yesterday, why am I not better at this thing the next day? And I think that progress bar puts you into the mindset of, this is a bit of a marathon, right? This is one of those things where you're going to be much more successful if you're one of those people that thinks about it as week 1's done, and then week 2's done, and then week 3's done. And it's no different than, we talk a lot about putting one foot in front of the other, like tortoise in the hare kind of situation. If you're the type of person that gets super riled up about a new phase and then fades by week 2 or 3, the person who does the weekly check-in, the person who has the progress bar, is just going to walk past you.
Yeah, being methodical is a huge portion of the growth that we're looking for with an athlete. You buy into something and you just kind of put your head down and work day after day after day, and don't get distracted by shiny objects. And honestly, I wouldn't say this is as big a problem now as it was maybe 3 or 4 years ago when there were, 20, 30, 40 different programming companies are all doing this. They're like, oh, they're doing a snatch complex. Oh, they're doing a cool C2 piece. Or they're just, and they're just jumping all around, and they don't have any consistency in their program, and they wonder why they get stuck. So to me, this is just another way to reinforce the behavior of, all right, I did the week, I earned the, coloring it in or checking it off. Like, that tells me that I've spent 1 week, then 2 weeks, then 3 weeks, and then 4 weeks, and so on and so forth, building a behavior. And now I can see that progress versus getting distracted by all the shiny objects in the room.
Yeah, we were going to potentially do an episode on this topic. I don't really want to. I don't love giving in to, putting someone on a pedestal, but it's hilarious to me. And I just thought of it because you're talking about that, the whole Jillian Michaels thing with I couldn't make it through the entire video. It made no sense to me. I thought it was ridiculous. I mean, how long is it? It's
like 10 minutes.
10 minutes,
yeah. But we were tagged by another podcast, and she talked about how the big issue is really that we don't have a plan, and that we don't try to progress people. And it's like, you literally just explained my job.
Fuck my entire fucking life. Once a month on a Friday, sitting here screaming at each other for 6 hours over the plan.
The whole beginning about CrossFit was trying to define what fitness is so you could track and progress. So the fact that you'd say that's not a thing, or they're just starting this new thing called 3 on, 1 off. It's like,
blessed, finally.
Pipe down, lady.
I'm finally allowed to take a rest day.
Thank goodness. But you won't.
I won't, no.
I couldn't believe that snippet specifically.
Yeah,
it's
just that's the definition
you're
of what
bashing me while explaining my job as the thing that we don't do. It's very confusing. The last piece here of sort of housekeeping, and it closes out phase 8, is we're going to start doing surveys about the phases. So whether it's misfitathletics.com/survey, whether it's the email that we send you, whether you see it, on our Instagram, wherever it is, we're doing a survey where if you followed phase 8, we want you to go in and tell us how you did on test and retest, and then any notes that you have about the phase. And what this allows us to do is to see, with all of the tools that we use for variance, if we still have a bias in a certain area, right? So if X amount of people come in and they crushed 4 of the tests in terms of what their improvement was, but then we keep seeing that one thing, we reevaluate the test, we reevaluate what happens in between, and so on. So I think it's going to be really important for us to get this information from you guys. It's sort of one of those things where we're like, hey, we're going to keep doing podcasts and articles and musings and all that. Now it's time for us to ask them for something and just say, go in, fill out this survey. It's going to help you in the long run, and it's going to help us make sure, again, that even though we obsess over variance and use it essentially in every way that we can think of, that doesn't mean that there isn't, a possibility that, we got to focus more on, this deadlift piece, or we got to make sure you handstand walk more often, or, we say you got to press to press. So do we need more strict handstand push-ups? Things of that nature.
Yeah, it's funny when you were talking about that. It reminds me of the training partner thing where you kind of pull each other along and get better and better. We rely on you guys to jump into the program and get better from it, and then we learn from your experience and how we can be better. So we're constantly kind of going back and forth. You tell us what's good, what's bad, and what we can improve on. We take that information, we sit down, we talk about it. We think, all right, how do we make our programming better? And we work together as a group, essentially, right here. To me, it feels a lot like that training partner idea where we learn from you guys and you learn from us, and it's a a symbiotic relationship back and forth where we can kind of pull each other along and give you the best possible scenario to be the fittest person you can for the 2021 Open, and then there on beyond.
Right. I mean, when we started in we started the website in 2012, we were still very much in a society where commenting on a website made sense, right? Now it's like I have fatigue from all of the places where it would even be possible to tell someone how I was doing. And a lot of misfits sort of follow our advice and say, create your own little tribe of misfits and compare scores and everything. But what that means is we don't necessarily see as many scores as we used to. Knowing that we have way more people following the program and seeing less scores creates a scenario where we would want to do this survey and get, more information on that. The Open, programming for the Open, it's like, it's unique and it's fun, but it's definitely challenging, right?
100%.
And I mean, that's what you want as a coach and a programmer. You want, sort of a specific set of issues where you're trying to attack it. So when I say challenge, like that's sort of the thing we look for. If everything was exactly the same phase after phase, the challenge would be in it being, more like mundane, which is 100% not the case when it comes to this season. And the reason why it's more unique to me is because of the athlete needing more than ever at this time in the season to individualize their hierarchy of what they need to execute on. And if we know that all of these separate athletes exist out there, how do we write a program for all of them, right? And we've had the variable training system since day one. Mandatory, non-mandatory, you go in, you pick your pieces. Maybe you even take the mandatory piece and say, nah, that's wheelhouse. I don't really need that right now. Or, oh, that's wheelhouse. I need that right now. We all know, when you have those moments. And before I get into what I think, belongs on your hierarchy, where you're the one that decides the order, I can't stress enough that this is like a recipe for something. And you need to go in order, but that doesn't make, like, I don't know the order of any sort of baking situation, but I know, well, no, that's not true. Sometimes you got to do the butter and the sugar together and it's soft and I don't know, whatever.
Tracking. I'll think of us
You
cookies
put
right
the
now.
egg, you put the egg in later. That doesn't mean that you don't need the egg in the recipe.
Is that a new sharpen the axe
Are you
line?
guys you put the egg in later? Put the egg in later.
I'm sniffing what you're stepping in.
All right.
There we go. Carry on.
So the idea is that, yes, this might come before this, but if we throw that other thing out, the entire recipe has gone to shit. You're like, well, I mean, I don't like eggs, so you leave it out, and then it doesn't. I don't know what would happen. I don't even know what would happen. I used the worst analogy possible.
all I kind of gathered from that,
eggs, guy.
all I really gathered from that analogy was like,
Breakfast sandwich doesn't count.
as important as that, realize there are a certain roster of movements and combinations and feels that workouts are going to be over the course of the Open. Prerequisite is you got to fucking try, and you got to work really hard, and you got to learn as much as you can over the next 7 weeks, because there's a lot to gain. And if you just think more about the plan and not the actual execution of it, you're only doing half the job that you need to be doing. So for me, it's just like kind of the analogy of like, you don't have the egg, you can't, bake the cake. It's that all of the planning is great, but if you don't execute on that plan or to, take actual time to sit down and think about where you need to address your weaknesses for the next 7 weeks, I mean, just following along blindly is something we try to get people to not do at all times, but specifically now with the 7 weeks we have to get ourselves ready, there's no time better than now to take those last little finishing touches and trying to improve yourself as best you can, because then we're in the throes of the Open, right? We're going to go from these 7 weeks to having a couple weeks and then we're in it. So we got to be ready to do that type of thing.
And to try and pull your baking analogy out of the dumpster.
Oh my God. When does the egg go in? No one knows.
Everybody,
on your head.
Follow the recipe.
Goes on your head.
I think the way that we kind of like communicate this to the followers is just by saying, like, we have kind of, throughout the course of the year, we've obviously got our master list of shit that we need to check off, which is everything you can think of. And as we get closer to the Open, we do dwindle that down. We don't completely omit certain things, but are we too worried about a sled push popping up in the Open? No, probably not. Are we worried about wall balls? Yes, very much so. So we are still making sure that we're focusing on the things that we are more likely to see in the Open. So I think kind of the followers can take a little bit of solace in that fact that we do recognize there's, like 4 movements that get programmed every Open. That's it pretty much. And we're just going to hammer those movements, not actually for like 10 or 15, whatever it is. But we're gonna hammer those movements so you are prepared for them. But obviously, we're not gonna just throwing the baby out with the bathwater. We've still got the rest of the stuff that we need to make sure.
Do you put the water in first or the bubbles in first?
Listen, and guy, you're gonna put the baby in first. Sherb's like, put the baby in first. It's fine.
Head first.
Zion. No, please.
So we're gonna get back to the ingredients list here.
Jesus, don't. Okay.
We have the basics, and the reason that I call them the basics, and the reason that it's in this hierarchy, is because I know people who have been more ready for the open than almost anyone else on earth, and they suck at double unders or wall balls or ... right? That is so it hurts me. Like, it really hurts me. And the issue here is that a lot of these people, like, beautiful clean and jerk, muscle up, efficiency for days, and then no wall ball.
Still not talking about you.
Yeah, definitely not talking about you now.
I'll go back to bad double unders again soon.
Like that is a box that needs to be checked off, and I think that people might believe subconsciously that they're better than that when they might not be. And it's a very unique problem to have, but it happens. Like, people skip the basics and go to the sexier stuff, and then, energy systems are where they need to be, more complicated movements are where they need to be, and then they're all over the place. They're like jumping and throwing the wall ball as high as they can. They're tripping over their double unders. Like, that stuff to me it's tough.
Well, to me, it's funny because we'll go to camps. In the past, we'd teach a camp, and people are excited about like the 1 rep max lift that we typically do on the Friday night. And then we get to Saturday and Sunday, and that lift's already kind of come and gone, and we're sprinkling some other things in, and like they're listening for us on our opinions on things. And then like it's like, hey, when you do a burpee, I don't want to see your chest come up first, or like when you do your wall ball, I don't want your heels to leave the ground. And it's just simple things. And they're like, I never thought about putting my hands under the medicine ball on a wall ball versus like pinching on the sides. And these little things have tremendous impact on your fitness because they're all about efficiency. Like movement efficiency doesn't stop with Olympic lifts and high skill gymnastics. It starts with very simple shit like dumbbell box step overs and how to do a burpee right and where should your hands go when you jump on the rope. Like little like marginal things that sometimes are just like completely forgotten about are things that we try to highlight, because if you're not thinking about those things, you're not thinking about the entire ecosystem. You're thinking about a very specialized slice of that pie instead of the entire pie.
I think the one thing that's kind of interesting is we were talking about this morning after we both took class, and it's the idea that like kind of the beginner's mindset, the kind of that blissful ignorance that you have as somebody who's just getting started in CrossFit, and you see a workout and you have no concept for how long it's going to take or how hard it's going to be or whether you should break something up or not. And so you just send it. And there comes the point just as the experience level grows and as you understand more about yourself and your strengths and weaknesses, you start to bias those things internally and externally within a workout. And it's like, oh, this is my weak point. I know that I'm double unders, for example, like double unders in the workout today. Double unders are something that for some people it just waxes them. Others it's like, yeah, so sure, not great with handstand push-up, hang power clean. For whatever reason, the jump rope just is debilitating. But you are significantly fitter than the requirement to do 100 unbroken double unders.
Correct.
And a lot of that just comes down to you kind of adopting that or readopting that beginner mindset and stuff like that, and just kind of like go for it and see how it goes and try to do those double unders unbroken. And then when it comes time for, 21.1, whatever it is, then you can adopt the by any means necessary sort of strategy to get the work done as fast as you can or as much work as you can get done. But again, for most of these, you listening to this, and have a hard time convincing me that you're not fit enough to do 30 unbroken wall balls, to do consistent sets of 75 double unders, the super basic open style movements. Have a hard time convincing me that you can't do that. You need to break those sorts of things up. It's either you can't or you haven't legitimately kind of made the effort to feel what it's like to cross that threshold to be like, oh yeah, turns out the first 20 really suck. And then the last 10 of those wall balls, like, oh, I'm fine. Like I just need to cross that kind of invisible threshold for myself, and now I'm good, and it clicks.
Yeah. And if you're still not there mentally with this, it's just a math equation. Like the super high skill movements, do the math on how many reps you're doing, how much time under tension there is there, and then ask yourself, are those typically like the things that have 100, 200, 300 reps? No, they never are. Right. They never have been, and they never will be. So if you have sets of 5 muscle ups in a workout, and then you have sets of 30, 40 wall balls or X amount of double unders or this many calories on the rower, it's like, wouldn't you want to be better at that other thing that's going to take up most of the workout? Like, so we have to make sure that box is checked off. And I do believe wholeheartedly that it belongs in everyone's hierarchy. It's the time of year where you refocus on the simple things that could move the needle. Like you refocus on the fact that, okay, I am good at double unders, but do I always just go pick up the rope and go? Like, am I obsessed over how I lay my rope down so that I can get into another round? Because like in the open, that stuff actually matters quite 100%. A bit. Moving on to the next thing, and I would separate this into 2 camps potentially, but I hate putting too much onus on strength when it comes into the open. So this would be what I would call more like open skill set. Open skill set's going to be your muscle ups, your chest to bar, toe to bar, handstand push up, but I would include the clean and jerk and the snatch within that. And of course that's going to be 2 camps in a lot of cases. A lot of big people like weights and a lot of small people like gymnastics. You know, obviously there's crossover there quite a bit, but the idea that you need to make sure that, like, again, maybe we're talking about someone whose energy systems are just, super robust, on fire, and they just cannot figure out the open standard when it comes to the handstand push-up. Or anytime they have to touch a barbell because they, over grip or whatever, they can't go do chest to bar, sort of those combination type things. So we started with the basics. Now we're sort of moving on to, what a lot of people consider the sexier stuff, and super important and repeated a shitload throughout phase 9. We are, into that sports specific mode. But it's important again to know where you stand with these things. Cause there are a lot of people that are great at the basics and not good at this stuff, but there are people, sort of in that other direction. And then sort of closing this up a little bit and finishing the recipe, and maybe this is the egg and maybe this is the flour, I'm not sure, but energy,
what are you making?
Energy system manipulation. This is sort of like, I got the movements down, I need to get my ass in shape. I can understand this category a little bit here.
Speaks to you.
Now, energy system manipulation then spiders out into, what are we talking about? Are we talking about anaerobic? Are we talking about aerobic? Are we talking about, what happens to me when, again, certain movements are mixed together, that kind of thing. And what sort of leads me into helping people figure out what's going on here is there will not be something like massively long, slow aerobic in the open. Like, no, there's a pretty good chance that we're not going to be there. But you do that and you work downstream and make every single other scenario much better. So it can't be left out. It absolutely can't be left out. And for a lot of people, like, you're not going to want to hear this, we are trying to be more sport specific now, but if you have not developed your aerobic system, you're going to have a real fucking problem in the open, because it's like, keep your heart rate down, keep yourself calm, and just move from movement to movement to movement, and just over and over and over. And you can imagine that, if you flush waist and you can keep your heart rate down and you can stay calm and you can remind yourself to be calm,
that statement makes me so happy, because one of the things we've really tried to make a point over the last year is getting people to do the fasted cardio, do those longer pieces, get used to putting yourself into that like 60 to 70% effort over a very long timeline, because we have seen firsthand how much it helps athletes. There is no better example of how much your aerobic engine influences your fitness than those merry-go-round workouts that happen every single year in the open. And I think a great example is that just you and I going back and forth. And a little bit was, being a little bit better with the dumbbells and being obviously just a little bit tougher. But having a robust aerobic engine allows you to recover as you exercise. Something that's very apparent in someone who can do 5 or 6 rounds at a 40-second clip. And then all of a sudden that 40-second round turns into a minute 5 and then a minute 15 and a minute 30. And they're like, how did so-and-so buy themselves the time to get 4 more rounds than me? And it was nothing more than they know how to temper that like 80% and allow them to stay moving at 80% the entire time versus like you or I might go 100 for 3 or 4 rounds and then go, oh shit, there's 16 minutes left in this mech. What do I do now? So to me, this is what you just said is such an important statement. And even though the open's not going to put us on a 40-minute clock for any point, there are still things during the next 7 weeks that are designed to develop that specifically. And you'd be remiss not to kind of put those into your weekly plan, because again, if you don't, you're going to be kicking yourself in the ass later on going, man, why did 21.x fuck me up so bad? And it was because you didn't take the time to develop that pathway the way you should.
Yeah. And where this sort of goes from, what we're saying and what we've programmed and is, the ball is thrown into the athlete's court here, is the responsibility to establish this order is the beginning. And then there's this massive responsibility to execute on that. And again, we would love to be able to write a program, if it was, whatever, 1984 style, and you were all on a conveyor belt and it was, here's the RTF 26 model. He's going to take that, but people are so unique. There's so much nuance to this. And that's why there is so much non-mandatory conditioning work within this phase. You're going to go into almost every single day and see a non-mandatory Metcon and interval, and you're going to have to decide based on that hierarchy and reestablishing that hierarchy and reminding yourself of that hierarchy day in and day out that this is the piece that I need to use to get better. There's remote coaching options. There's Hatchet where we remove a lot of that stuff. There's the affiliate programming. There are, avenues where we've just made sure the variance is there and you're bouncing back and forth between Metcon and interval and all that. But if you are trying to use the open to qualify, for these sanctional, regional, whatever the hell is going to happen things, there's going to be a lot of responsibility on you as an athlete to choose the correct piece going throughout the week. It's really about asking yourself day in and day out, what's going to move the needle? Like, if I got better at this thing and then the open workout came up, what's going to move the needle for me? That even extends beyond the actual piece itself. How do you execute within the piece? Like, because the open's weird. The open is like, you don't need to move fast through the movement itself, rarely. You don't need to do anything crazy, but you cannot stand around between movements.
Oh, absolutely
right?
not.
So we always use, because we like to fuck with Sherb, we always use the example of the thruster,
the dumbbell thruster,
the dumbbell thruster workout from last year. But Hunter just did the same thing over and over and didn't look like he, was in a frenzy at any point. You looked like you were in a frenzy at the beginning and you paid for it.
Let's try to whoop that ass. Newsflash, did not.
Not quite.
Not quite.
But again, that's a lesson. A lesson for, okay, I need to get better at not because it can be scary, right?
I was going to say that what you just described, the struggling with the thruster, is the reason why, if I go down and I want to press in my basement, I can't go overhead. I have to sit on a bench. I purposefully stack these dumbbells in what feels like a really awkward position on my shoulder, but it's because I wasn't comfortable with it. And I realized it wasn't that I wasn't strong enough. It wasn't that I wasn't fit enough. It's because I never practiced the right way to do it. So I worked harder than I needed to, and I learned from it. So I said, well, fuck, I'm really bad at lunges. I'm really bad at pressing dumbbells overhead. I could pick things out over the course of the year, opened my eyes to, and said, all right, well, fuck that. I ain't letting that happen again, because, we like to compete here for fun. It's just, nothing more than bros throwing out, but I don't want to have that same problem next year. I don't want to get lapped 15 times in a 12-minute workout. So for that reason, something as simple as I'm going to try to rotate the dumbbells and stack them on my shoulder. That would be something I would think about any single time I have to put a dumbbell in the front rack. Doesn't matter if it's a dumbbell power clean, a thruster, a lunge. I'm going to always be practicing this position so that when it comes back up, I'm not thrown for a loop and going like, fuck, like, why are my dumbbells 15 pounds heavier than yours? And the answer is they're not. I'm just inefficient. So to me, that was something I focused on the entire year. And things we're going to be talking about week to week is, think about those little nuances. Think about extending your knee in a wall ball and making sure that you don't early pull on the rower chain. Like, there are so many little things that you can learn from training, and you can feel how these things interact with one another. So, I mean, that to me is kind of like what we're trying to do with all of our conditioning and interval pieces, is think about these combinations that could potentially trip someone up and say, all right, when this is before that, how can you survive the first thing to do well in the second thing? And that to me is why I love interval work. And that's why probably for me, where I'd spend most of my time if I was going to jump in some of these pieces, because I typically struggle with going hard and then resting a little bit and then going hard again versus just kind of staying at a slow pace when the workouts are low skill. So to me, the intervals are no better way to like work out, reevaluate, and then come up with a new strategy for the subsequent rounds.
I think the both of those are really good points and really important for athletes to be thinking. Again, we talk about this a lot, kind of in the workout features and on podcasts, kind of the difference or when you're deciding between choosing kind of like an MFT piece or a hatchet piece. But especially when it comes to the open, doing something unbroken is not impressive and it's not useful. Unless that means that you can still go right to the next movement. Right. If you're saying to yourself like, oh, I could do this workout unbroken, I'm going to stand around a bunch between movements, I'm going to turn this into a glorified interval, then you're not preparing for the open and the needs that are required to perform successfully, which is minimizing like how much time you're standing around. Even if that means you are dropping the barbell, you're coming off the pull-up bar, whatever it is, it's not as much like, nope, the leaderboard doesn't give a shit if you did it unbroken. It gives a shit about what your time was and that's more indicative of how long you had to rest between sets and movements and stuff like that. So doing something unbroken, especially like in this specific example, is not impressive. It's more, what can you do consistently over the course of the entire piece? And when it comes to the really short, the 5, 6, 7 minute sort of workouts, that still applies, obviously a little bit less. And that's when you have to kind of dig into that toolbox of the interval work that you did, the threshold training, that sort of thing, where you know just how far you can go before you need that big break.
Right. So we write these phases. I mean, we're 2 phases ahead right now, working on, stuff for spring of next year. And one of the main reasons that we do that is so that we can say, okay, here's the plan. Like, this is, we have our blueprint here. This is the thing that we're looking at. But then we come together and say, like, potentially more importantly, what's our content going to look like to convince people to execute? What's our content going to look like to convince people to work on things outside of the gym as well? Because what we need to happen is we need, the first ingredient of, come on,
carrots. Oh, sorry.
The first ingredient of
a pot roast
confidence is preparation, right?
Of course.
Like the original reason why, if you were getting started in this sport, that you might not be so confident when the open rolls around, because you didn't prepare very well, right? Like that, we see it at the affiliate level a lot. People get very excited about getting their first chest to bar or this or that, and then they're like, I'm going to eat my vegetables and do chest to bar every day for the next year. And then we roll around
12 minutes later
and it's like, well, I got time. Yeah. Everything's good. But outside of that, I truly believe that people start to develop narratives about what they're capable of, whether they're tough, whether they can take the stuff that they do in the gym and do it in the spotlight. So if that's the case, if you're the person that, it's sort of like tragedy number 1 is you're amazing at everything, but you can't do double unders. Tragedy number 2 here is you're amazing at everything, including double unders, but you don't believe in yourself. Like, that to me is brutal, because then you have the person that didn't prepare that well, that like is like, oh, I'm ready. Like, I'll throw down.
Fucking walks through the door sideways and, it's just like, what's up? And still wins.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So for us, it's about how do we take this execution? How do we take the idea that, yes, you do need to check off all those boxes in the gym, But then outside of the gym, we got to work on recovery. We got to care even more about sleep and nutrition. And we got to care, maybe most importantly, about the stories that we're telling ourselves. Like, are you constantly like super excited the Open's coming up on Wednesday? I don't want to do the Open on Thursday. You're excited again on Friday, and then Saturday you're going to be a weightlifter. Like, if you continue to transition from all of
Happens to me
these
5 times a year.
wildly up and down moods throughout it, like, what's the story you're going to tell yourself in any given day during the actual Open when it's coming up? So for us, it's about, okay, we need a very well-prepared athlete, but we need a confident athlete. And, you know, we're going to put out content from now all the way through the entire Open that tries to get you to remember to think about that stuff. But like, you know, what do you guys think is the homework for them? Like, it's, you know, it's the people that you surround yourself with, you know, it's, you know, support systems. It's, you know, if you are having a shitty day and you're not believing in what you're doing, like, how do you get yourself out of that? How do you start to rack up day after day after day where you know you're taking those steps towards the Open and that you're going to be ready to go? All right, Misfits, just a quick break to shout out our show sponsors. Thank you to Proper Fuel. Head to properfuel.co and buy yourself a jug of Proper Recovery. When we used to travel for training camps, I got made fun of for bringing an entire duffel bag of supplements, and I would set them up nice and neatly.
Hockey bag of
supplements, set them up nice and neatly somewhere, and then eventually they'd make their way into every part of the entire hotel room and suite. You don't need to do that anymore because we have a complete post-workout nutrition solution. Carbs and protein in the same bottle, but we also have digestive enzymes if you don't handle whey. We got your creatine in there. We got your pink salt for hydration. Of all your bases covered, all you need to do is work your ass off, wait 1 hour for your nervous system to recover, and then slug yourself a nice shake of Proper Recovery. Head to properfuel.co and use the code word MISFIT to save on your first order.
We are also brought to you by Pure Spectrum CBD. If all of this talk about the Open has got you anxious, a little bit nervous, now might be the time to grab one of those tincture bottles, little dropper under the tongue, or if kind of that taste, maybe I've heard some people say it's like a little wonky of a taste.
Maya looks like she's going to puke when I do it. So some people hate the oil feel.
Got it. Yeah, the oil feel, not something you're in love with. They just released some Pure Spectrum gummies. So you can basically take a little edible, taste a little bit better for your palate. Either way, awesome to kind of down-regulate at the end of the day, make that part of your evening routine before you get ready to tackle that Open workout. Head to purespectrumcbd.com, use the code word MISFIT, save a few bones.
We are also brought to you by Sharpen the Axe. Head to sharpentheaxeco.com for those last-minute Christmas gifts. If you're like me, you haven't done your shopping yet, or you've done a little bit of it, but you realistically know that you're probably going to buy a bunch of STA gear for your friends and family. Like I always do, you know, get those sweatshirts, the joggers, the socks, sweatbands. Got a lot of CrossFitters in the family, so it works really, really nice for me. But if you use the code word unprepared, you can save yourself a little green. Or if you'd like to donate 10% of your order to the Keala Foundation, use the code word Keala, Keala, to send them some dough. It's a great cause. I definitely recommend you guys do that.
I was sure you were going to fuck that spelling up, but nice job.
I spelled it out on my computer.
Last but not least, we are obviously brought to you by Misfit Athletics, Team Misfit. You can head to misfitathletics.com or teammisfit.com or the SugarWOD marketplace to try all this shit that we're talking about for free for 2 weeks. Okay, we believe in it that much. You can try it for free for 2 weeks. And because we gave it to you for free, we are asking you to fill out that Phase 8 survey that we already talked about. You are going to get an email. It's going to be at misfitathletics.com/survey. We're going to be talking about it on social media. All we need you to do is to go in, answer the questions, your test and retest scores, all that good stuff. Thank you. Back to the episode.
To me, you find early wins. Like, that is the best way to inspire some confidence, is to find an early win in the day. And one of the things that we haven't got into quite yet, but we're about to, is that morning movement. Right. So we have something that's brand new to the blog coming up in Phase 9, and it's basically 4 days a week. Get up, get moving, and it's going to take you through some stuff like some static holds, some range of motion movements, get your heart rate up a little bit, and just kind of wake you up and kind of set your day to be successful the rest of the way out. And I really do think that if you can get up and get that first win within the first half hour of your day, you're setting yourself up to be like, all right, I've done one good thing for myself today, and that one good thing is going to beget another good thing. So for me, that's kind of where I start, is with that morning movement stuff. I'm going to get up, get something checked off right away, feel good about myself, break a little bit of a sweat, and then just set myself up for a better day. And what's great about the morning movement stuff is it's kind of low to moderate intensity stuff. It's not meant to be like beat yourself into the ground. And during that period, you can start to think about, all right, what is my rest of my day going to look like? And if I can do this one thing right, what else can I do right today? Or what else can I gain from this day? And I think just setting the positivity, like mood early on is a huge part about building those wins. Because if you get up and you're like, fuck, it's cold outside, it's February, I hate this shit, like that's just going to set you up for the rest of the day being negative and being pessimistic. So to me, it's just about getting up and getting that early win. That is my favorite way to do it. One of the things I think you told me about in one of the books, I think maybe it was Jocko, is like you get up and make your bed. Like simple shit like that. Like get up, do one thing that takes almost no effort, but makes you feel like you're on the right path. To me, the morning movement's kind of like making your bed for like Misfits. Like you get up and you get something knocked out right away.
Yeah, and it sounds to me like what you're suggesting is developing the right perspective about things.
Correct.
Because if you make your way through the entire phase and you realize that you're stacking victory on victory on victory on victory, and then when you do lose, you realize that's a victory because you actually have feedback to try and change something. Like imagine if you didn't get that feedback throughout the phase, you found out during the open workout. Right? Yes. That would be a problem. So it's really about perspective and saying, man, I keep winning over and over and over and over and over. Like you're building this massive amount of like momentum, this mountain of victories to then go stand on. But you could also just stand next to it and say I did nothing. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
So
it's
I feel like
lens,
perspective is really everything when it comes to this.
If you get that lens and you zoom too close into one particular instance, like today with the affiliate class work, if I zoomed in on my middle set of double unders, like, man, I fucking still suck at these things. This is terrible. But if I back off a little bit and say, all right, like I was able to do the amount of work under the required time that coach said it would take, like that's a victory there. And I learned something like maybe it would be better off to break up the barbell stuff so I could do better at the jump rope, and learn those things ahead of when it actually matters and when it's going to, end up determining the rest of your season, the rest of your year. That to me is so impactful. And sometimes it just takes that lens of like backing up and taking more of like a 10,000 foot view versus like one particular instance. Like, how come I couldn't do these 100 in a row? Like, what else did I learn from that? And that to me is just about backing off.
I think for me, it's looking at okay, so now we've done the morning movement. We've kind of set ourselves up for success. We go into the gym, and it's, while I do enjoy, or I do think it's valuable to have kind of those little micro goals within a workout. It's also important to recognize that the number of variables that go into your performance in any given workout is for all intents and purposes infinite. So you're not going to be able to control those things. The front squat work that you did 2 days ago might be affecting your whatever today. Like all those little things kind of add up, and it's really difficult to put kind of a finger as to why did this feel good last week? It feels like shit today. So it's not to get too wrapped around the axle when things don't go as expected, so to speak. And then to use those sorts of things and just kind of find some sort of victory in every training piece. Like today, for example, that barbell felt a little bit better than I expected. I held myself to two sets. If I told myself like my goal is to go unbroken and I did 2 sets every time, that might seem like kind of a failure to me. And it maybe like on another day, the hang power clean feels a lot better and I do that unbroken. But today it wasn't there today. And kind of mid workout, it became like, okay, I'm going to catch Sherb by doing these double unders unbroken because I know he hates that. So it's one about just having kind of a little bit of built-in flexibility to what your goals are for the day. But regardless of how things go, you should still be able to look back and find something that you kind of took away from it to turn into a positive. Because it doesn't do you any good to only reflect on those negative things, because what you did today was either something that you can learn from or you kind of achieved your goals. So it is kind of the win or learn mentality, but be flexible in that sense, because like I said, there's so many variables that are really difficult to control as to why you may or may not be feeling one way on any given day. And you need to have that flexibility come the open too. Like we're not going to stop training throughout the open. And you have to be willing to kind of go into that dark place, but also adjust if things aren't going as well as you planned. And if
you have no idea what's coming. You don't know what the workout is. You don't know what the combinations are going to be. And trying to guess right now is, again, a guess. It's not known. We don't know what's coming up. So to get wrapped around the axle, as you said, about something that you can't control is just wasted effort. So what can you control right now? And that's learning as much as possible and is it developing those energy systems and preparing yourself in a positive mindset so that when anything comes up, the first reaction you have is positivity. And that's a behavior you learn by practicing. Like you don't just say one day, go, all right, I'm going to be positive and everything else from there on out is positive. Like you have to constantly think about things from the like glass half full perspective versus half empty, because that half empty perspective, while valuable at some points, will drag you down into the depths where you're not going to want to keep growing. So to me, like, you know, you hear athletes talk about, I have to, and you hear people go, oh, no, you get to. Well, and it seems kind of like a cliche or like, I wouldn't say that, but like, it really is a thing. Like if you think about being positive and thinking from the positive side of the equation as the athlete, like you're going to keep growing because you're going to stay motivated and hungry. Let the coach or the person you kind of bounce the ideas off, maybe have that perspective and kind of reshape it for you in a positive light, but don't get so dragged down to the depths that all you think is negativity, because that's just going to drag you down to a point where you're not going to want to keep doing this stuff.
That mindset is also just highly illogical when you're trying to improve. It doesn't really make any sense. If let's say that I was training to stay exactly the same as I am now, that might make sense. You're training to improve. You must overreach to improve while you're training. And the idea that that wouldn't have an effect on your mind and your body in the subsequent training pieces or days makes no sense.
Absolutely not.
Whatsoever. You have to perform something that you were not previously capable of, right? And you have to start to stack those things on top of each other. And you're not going to know exactly when, like Hunter said, when that's going to affect something else, right? But you have to overreach. You have to go to those new places. You know, it's why interval training works. You have to go there to be able to improve. So unless you're hoping that by the end of phase 9, you are exactly as good as you were when it started, the idea that you're not going to have ups and downs makes no sense.
Yeah.
We are purposefully trying to give you, like, you know, that
difficulty.
Exactly. That difficulty, that downslope, that, you know, what do I do on that day, you know, when I'm not feeling so great? Like, that stuff matters. When it
comes to that sort of thing, like kind of going off of what you said, the overreaching thing, unless you overreach to the point where you hit legitimate failure, and I don't mean like I can't do a pull-up anymore, like I get that's going to happen, but until you push like past that point, you just have no idea kind of where your ceiling is, and you have to be willing to go to that place. And then when it happens and when you do fail, you have to be kind of excited to be like, like found it. Like how much more valuable is that information, knowing that like, oh shit, I either was like, you know what, I'm just going to send it and see what happens, and you do it, that unlocks a whole world to you that you say like, holy shit, like I didn't know what was back here. Or you hit that failure point at some point, you go as hard as you can until you hit that failure point, and then it's like, okay, now I know where that is. And that happened to me the other day with Caroline doing the sandbag clean and toes to bar. Like I was fully prepared after round like 1.5 to be like, all right, when's this gonna get broken up? But it's like, nope, like keep trying to hold on, see what happens. And you might find that you're in certain movements or in certain types of workouts that your capacity is, I can hold, 90% of my effort for a lot longer than I expected to. And that sort of thing is invaluable in the open.
The thing that came to my mind while you were speaking about this is during the lockdown, we did a workout at my house that was 50 bar facing burpees twice. And you rested 5 or 7 minutes between. So the idea was just send twice, see what happens. And one of the athletes I work with, James, he did an awesome job setting the first set, but then he was so upset with himself that he couldn't do it a second time. He's like, I did 50 burpees in 2 minutes once.
That's not possible.
I rested 5 to 7 minutes, and then I did it in 5 minutes. Like, oh man, like this sucks. And I'm like, and he was discouraged that he wasn't able to keep the splits tighter. I'm like, think about how much you just learned. You learned that you can hold 25 burpees a minute for 2 straight minutes. Think about how valuable that would be in, 20.1 where we had to do the power snatches and bar facing burpees. That information if you just look at it as I couldn't keep it as good as my last one, isn't the lesson you're supposed to be learning. Your lesson is, hey, I figured out what my pace could be at 100% intensity. And yeah, I got some extra volume in at the end with the extra second set of 50, but like the real idea was, what are you capable of in that first 50? And sometimes, again, kind of backing off that lens, that's where you learn those lessons. It wasn't about what your overall time was. It was how hard are you willing to suffer in the first one and what can you do when you're now cooked? Because both of those information bits are important. If the open were for some reason 1 minute max burpees, which God save me, that you know what that pace is.
Interested
Also,
as well.
You know what your forever pace on burpees is after you've already done 50 and you've got a chance to kind of reevaluate, or maybe it's burpees and rowing and you've now on the rower and you've gotten off the rower and you have to do burpees again. You know what that pace feels like. Both of those information bits are super useful. But if you look at it as I was slower on round 2, you're missing the boat. So to me, it's just like, it's good to have that like mindset and learn those type of things early on. And that's what the next 7 weeks are all about.
A lot of the stuff that we've talked about so far it's a wazi, it's a woozy. It's not on the elemental chart.
Hasn't landed
yet. Let's talk about actual action steps, because one of the things that's going to help you bring these concepts into actual practice is the idea of routine. And one of the things that we get to do within the programming is start to nudge you towards this idea of what does an open routine actually look like? And we don't shift the actual schedule until 2 weeks before the open. That's when the, sort of the open phase begins. But what we do is we have an open workout every Friday. We wrote an open workout weeks 1 through 7. You do get to retest a very special one that we've seen done in testing quite a bit, and that starts to set you up with this idea that during the open, we truly believe that when you are done working out on Tuesday, your open workout begins on that day. So we're gonna make it a little bit easier on you within this phase. Every Wednesday night, your open workout begins. Okay. So you get done your training on Wednesday, you go into Thursday, we have the flush day, we have the things that we want you to work on, and you really can start to get the sense of like, I need to, sort of be ready for this thing earlier. I need to, maybe walk away from an argument or get more sleep, or just sort of have this, like, put everyone on notice, like, hey, we're going good vibes here now for 48 to 72 hours. Like, if you got a grievance, file it on Saturday, that sort of thing. Get yourself into the mode of really understanding that you can set yourself up to be really kind of loosey-goosey, happy, confident, making sure that like, oh, well, I did whatever toes to bar on Tuesday or Wednesday and my grip's not, or my, my forearms are tight. So I'm going to do some stretches and I'm going to make sure that my flush is on the rower or the assault bike. So I use my arms, just all these little things that will actually move the needle physically, but I think much more mentally. Like if you're in the mode of, man, I checked off a lot of boxes, been drinking my water, been doing my post-workout stuff. I did all of these things and mentally I'm in the right place to go into this workout. I think that's when, for people that are looking for a much more practical application to all the stuff that we're talking about, that's where it starts. Get yourself into routine to the point where, the open's really just sort of a continuation of what you've been doing.
I think one of the, I guess I'm kind of going to jump ahead a little bit to like open execution itself, but probably more so like we publish the workouts on the Thursday night before, kind of, and you can treat that as almost like your open announcement when that Friday workout is posted. To me, one of the most common things I see, especially for relatively inexperienced competitors, is the panic that ensues when they recognize, and you should, if you are planning to be competitive and use the open, this phase, odds are we're probably not going to have the exact information that you would want to have from CrossFit for this phase. So you need to be treating it in a similar manner as if we did know. And what I mean by that is things like setting up a video camera, understanding where you're going to be positioning yourself physically in your gym to execute this open movement. I can't tell you how many times we see athletes who are like panicking to figure out the right camera angle, and oh fuck, I forgot the clock has to be in the video. What about the tape marks on the wall and all those little things? Because you warm up and those things maybe kind of get glossed over, and then you get a judge and they're just like, okay, where's this? Where are you doing that? And all of a sudden you realize you've got 13 other things to set up. You get set up, you start to panic. Oh fuck, I'm starting to cool down now. I need to re-warm back up. Like all those little unnecessary stressors that you don't necessarily need to worry about in training because it's just get up and do it. You should be thinking about those things both in your head, whether it's taking a piece of paper and kind of drawing it out or just visualizing where in the gym you're going to do it. Maybe it's picking out one of your training partners to be your judge for the open workout and trying to set those things up, because
not you.
I don't give a shit. No reps and no rep, bitch. And just kind of removing that stress beforehand. And maybe it is on Friday when you come in, you've kind of put that thing out in your head before you even start warming up. Yeah. You kind of set those things out so it is a smooth transition from warm up to primer, if there's a primer, to execution. Because there's nothing more stressful than thinking that you're fully prepared. You've done every single thing you could the other 47 weeks of the year, and then you get screwed because the coach was yelling at me to finish before class starts and stuff like that.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's to me where if you're listening to this and you're one of those people that's typically the judge or the person setting up the video camera, you're a coach, you're in this scenario, put the softest kid gloves on that you've ever had in any certain situation. Remove as many of those variables from their plate as possible. Like they're there to execute. It's no surprise that me personally, my highest open finish that I ever had, I missed the first 5 seconds of the clock because I didn't know we were starting. So I gave away 5 seconds and still had my highest finish that I've ever had because I didn't have that feeling in my chest of anxiety of I think someone came in to talk to me about joining the gym, and I was just having this conversation, and it's 3, 2, 1, and I ran over and grabbed the wall ball and started doing wall balls. So
you didn't do any wall balls.
Try to reverse engineer. Yeah, I'm kidding. That's the best open workout ever. The Karen into.
I agree. Yeah. Going 100%.
The double unders. It takes 6 years to do the double unders.
Perfect amount of double unders for
Back
me.
when no one could do muscle ups.
Dude, I did a muscle up and I came off the rings and you land and just my quads completely seized and I just continued to fall like a pancake into the ground. It was great.
Accurate. To talk a little bit more about what's happening with, there aren't a ton of huge changes that don't fall into the category of us making sure that you're doing more sports specific things. The other thing is going to be, we are moving an entire training session from wherever you want it in your day. So it's actually sort of 2 training sessions together. We are taking an aerobic session and a skill session, and we are putting it at the beginning of your day. So sure, alluded earlier to the fact that there are 4 days of the just kind of get up and move sort of vibe, which we're super excited about that. We've been working with SugarWOD on the sun salutations, going through and making sure that, we're, deferring to an expert on if you wanted someone to really sort of open up in the morning and, feel good about their body, what's sort of that, yoga flow session sort of thing. I don't know if you want to talk a little bit more about the actual aerobic training session, but I'm bringing it up specifically because it's a training session. It's not, optional weekly work. It's literally the training session, and we want it to be the first thing that you do that day. We talk all the time. I wrote an article called Fasted Cardio for President. I really wish he had won in 2020.
You got at least one write-in vote. So.
Yeah. So we would want that, but I don't want someone to skip it because they ate breakfast. You know what I mean? So it's not here's this rigid framework that you have no movement in. I would like to see people get up 1 day a week and do their monostructural stuff.
It's funny you say that. It's you can't just skip it because you had breakfast. It's not the end of the world if you don't do it fasted. But at the same time, you should try it every once in a while because, again, true CrossFit methodology is being willing to put yourself in scenarios you never worked out at, work out at midnight, work out outside, do these other things. Do it like Hunter does, work out naked. But like the idea with this day
Once a
4
week.
piece, this day 4 piece is we wanted to get you guys doing your aerobic work. And again, in a program fashion, a mandatory fashion that allows you to essentially take a longer, steady state aerobic piece. So C2 bike, ski, row, all those other things that you've been doing up to this point, and then just breaking them up with some gymnastics. And the idea here is that you get off, your C2 bike, you walk over to the pull-up bar, you hit one smooth, comfortable set of toes to bar, check in with the movement, make sure you're feeling like, you've got all your points of performance dialed in, and then you can go back to your bike again and again, flush things out. And the idea here is you're working on that aerobic energy system, you're checking in with some of those ranges of motion you need to have in some of these higher skill movements, and you're just getting a chance to kind of tidy them up. Because one thing we constantly put out into the universe with our media is you need to be efficient. You need to think about this. You need to think about that. And in this scenario, you're not in a super heart rate at 200 beats a minute. You're probably in that 120 to 145 range. So you're elevated, but you're still wherewithal enough to be like, all right, what do I got to think about my toes to bar? I got to get long, or my muscle ups. I got to focus on my turnover. And the idea here is you will do these on the mornings of your open tests. But these aren't meant to be just do 50 toes to bar 3 times because you can. The idea is you check in with smooth gymnastics, a small dose, so that you, again, touch that range of motion, but you don't beat yourself up for later in the day. So to me, putting it on the day of the open test is a great way to kind of get up, get sweaty, move through those ranges of motion. And we've talked about this a bunch in the past. If we could just convince CrossFitters to really break a good sweat before the open workout, they'd probably do better, because we hear it all the time that my first piece, I was kind of working through it. I was a little stiff, or that didn't feel great. And by second round, I felt awesome. So we'll get up, we'll get sweaty, we'll get moving around, and then we'll be good and lubed up for when it comes time to do that open test.
PR'd my clean and jerk after 15 point whatever, that sort of idea.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
You took your typical inhale where you're about to speak before. Did you just decide to pass the microphone?
That was part of my Wim Hof. Sorry,
All
I was
right.
doing that mid podcast.
So now we're starting to get into, that's a terrible noise. We're starting to get into more of the nerd zone, the programming specifics.
All right, fine, I'll talk.
But I want to address the specifics very quickly, and then talk about the tests, because we got some good tests coming up.
Sure do.
That we can preview a little bit here. Phase 8 guide will have all of this information.
9.
Phase 9 guide. Phase 8 guide did have all this
1.
information, and you can still download it if you'd like. Probably more applicable to this episode would be the Phase 9 guide that you can download and get this information. So really quickly, I'm going rapid fire here. I'm going to say what we're doing, tiny little bit about why we're doing it, and then tell people to go download whatever phase guide that I can remember to say at the end. We are going to try and peak our clean and jerk.
Coach, we did that 2 phases ago.
Very traditional in terms of we kind of know triples, doubles, and singles. Here I come to ruin your day. It's all about whether it's before a Metcon, after a Metcon, or in a Metcon. So you will notice that every clean and jerk session is attached to or inside of a conditioning piece. Ooh. So you're going to do, jeez, you guys are the worst.
Yeah, you went there.
I did go there. All right. So you're going to clean and jerk and then have a very specific rest period into a Metcon, or you're going to have a Metcon with a very specific rest period into the clean and jerk, everyone's favorite. And then we have an interval mixed in there where you're going to do your clean and jerk work within the actual workout itself. This is sort of tested and retested and brought up in a very traditional way. Week 1's open workout is going to be open workout into, continuing into a running clock where you get to find your 1 rep max clean and jerk. So we are focusing on peaking the clean and jerk in a very traditional way in terms of sets and reps, in a very untraditional way, very sport specific way, by attaching it to a conditioning piece itself. Our high rep movement that we're going to have in strength work is touch and go power variations of Olympic lifting. Power clean and push jerk, power snatch, all that good stuff. We heard your feedback loud and clear. You liked it the last time we did it, but you said that you may or may not have thumbs anymore. So we have 2 things to say. 1, we hear you. The rep count is a little bit lower. 2, you're going too heavy. You will not have, we can think of an athlete or 2 that's tried this in the past, but you're not going to have a moment within the open where you go and do a max set in the middle of a workout for absolutely no reason at a weight that afterwards you have to go do something else, and now you're
cycle at 225.
Eight clean and jerks at 225.
Right.
I have to hold on.
right. And we're gonna get to what Grisabel is here in a minute. Very special workout that we've had.
Just let the people guess.
Have it like in their back pocket. That's the idea that we want you to be using in this. If you're doing like a 12-10-8, I do not care if you can do 225 for 12 when it comes to, I mean, honestly, either of the movements. It doesn't mean anything to me. What I want to happen is you to stroll up to the barbell, do a clean, efficient, Metcon type, sort of effort and energy. It's just like an interval. It's just like a skill session. We crank it up a little bit. If Grisabel's 135, you're doing this with one, maybe up to 185, but it doesn't need to be super heavy. You're going in, you're getting a little bit of practice in on movement efficiency. If you're resting overhead, if you're resting in the front rack, if you have to put the bar at your hip for the snatch, like that's not practicing what we're after here.
It's not a party trick. It's meant to be skill. Sorry, I screamed.
Don't yell at me, mister.
It's not a
Fuck 'em
party
up,
trick.
Sherby.
It's not meant to be a party trick. We don't care that you can put 275 over your head for
Stop
full touch and go.
projecting because you hate touch and go. All right.
I mean,
That's me.
Not wrong. But I was just going to say there is one other day that we'll have another high rep movement like this that is optional, but with the exact same idea in mind.
Right.
Like the idea is that you're able to work through some of those more non-traditional barbell movements. And I mean non-traditional in like the traditional strength sense, not from a CrossFit perspective, but like the idea being you're trying to get smooth and comfortable with these open-esque weights, not, hey, I was able to do a 20 rep max overhead squat at 225. Like, good job, party trick.
Our skill focus lift of the phase is the snatch. And there are two separate ways that we will try to help someone get better at the movement. One of them typically belongs in like March, April, May, that sort of time of year where we literally do, a full week at one position. And then the next week we go down to, the position that's, lower than that, sort of work on the top down, high hang, low hang floor. What we don't want is for you to progress through that and only get a chance to pull from the floor in those couple of weeks preceding sort of the end of it. So we are still doing the three positions, but they're all together. And what that really allows you to do is to have immediate feedback on, okay, was I able to, I just did my rounds, from power position or mid thigh. Can I translate the exact same movement by just going whatever 6 to 8 inches lower down my leg? Once you've done that, you get to go to the floor and you get to really think about, hey, how did I do going through all of these positions? And what I would say is going to move the needle the most for you is whether you've checked that box off versus what weights you use. We do have direction on the weights, where we want you to go with that, but you have to think of it from a skill focus. And one of the easiest ways to do that is to just continue to have a more tempo pull throughout the course of the weeks and then work into getting better at it over the course of 7 weeks. So like if you're really struggling with like when I sweep from the knee to the hip, I can't get my weight in my heel, slow your pull down, slow your first pull down, slow your second pull down, and then get aggressive, when you hit that position that you want to be in.
Go lighter.
We believe wholeheartedly that working on the snatch from the standpoint of manageable, percentages and actually thinking about your movement moves the needle a lot more than, your traditional 3-2-1 peaking phase. Obviously that depends on your actual skill level itself, but if you get better at the snatch, you're much more likely to actually go into something where you're breathing your ass off and be able to hit a rep versus let's stand around all day and wait for you to do 6,000 attempts at 285 and one of your hump and dumps, prayers were answered and you catch it.
Actually,
Nailed it.
beautifully described this in class a couple weeks back. You said, can you deadlift this weight? For this, talking about your snatch. The answer is yes.
No.
Can you overhead squat this weight? The answer is yes. Can you power clean and pull the bar high enough that you could, in theory, get underneath the bar? Yes. So why can't you snatch it? It's not because it's not fucking heavy enough, because you don't know how to do it correctly. So slow down. And that's actually probably the biggest point with this particular skill work is that if you feel like you're changing your movement or it doesn't feel like it does from the floor, why? Don't just be like, hey, it's because it's from the hang. It's not the same. Big deal. I'll move on. Like, why is it different? What have you learned from this? And I remember at one point years ago, you're like, go out in the gym and use an empty barbell until you can't anymore, which meant like do 12,000 reps. But like that actually helped a bunch. And that
Thought you were going to say 12, and I was like,
took a lot of practice, but like that was a huge lesson for me back when I cared about being like really fit was what did you learn from this? Is that like, I can't do this with an ego. I can't go in with my ego being like, I've never used green plates on a bar when I snatch. It's like, bud, you probably should.
Bitch, you do now.
Yeah, bitch, you do now because you want to get better at it. And when you can, extract the ego from that and just say, I'm going to work on this or that, or like what you were just talking about with how come when I go to low hang, it doesn't feel the same sweep or it doesn't feel the same position as I'm in the high hang. Ask yourself why and figure it out. Watch, work with your coach, but like really, really, really dial things back and get better at the skill. Don't worry so much about what you can put on Instagram.
True. We always have a speed lift. We always have a lift where we're asking the athlete to, really be aggressive when, typically it's going to be, in a squat movement. It works very well with a squat movement, sort of shout out to, Super Training, West Side Barbell, that whole, ecosystem of lifting. We know we know that we can manipulate whether you're getting stronger at a lighter weight, not crush your CNS. And we need it to be sports specific. And we would really like it to supplement you trying to peak your clean and jerk in case that comes up. Yeah. So that's why it's going to be the front squat. You're going to do your typical warm up to that, 80 to 90% single, just to, make sure that your body's ready to produce that kind of speed. And then you're just going to go through a traditional, speed work phase. Not sexy, super effective. Last but not least, for the mandatory work, we have GPP deadlift. We just don't know whether you're going to have to do 100 of them at 135. You're going to have to, climb a ladder with less and less weight. So guess what we're going to do? We're going to do all of it. What we do when we want to achieve GPP within a lift where it applies from, short and heavy to long and slow and all that stuff in between is we just cover all of our bases that we just talked about. Talk about, sort of your 1 rep max style, your high rep, your speed work, all of that. We have all of that stuff built in to sort of a rotation of what you're going to do with your deadlift so that you can really sort of figure out what's going on there. 2 of those days are skill sessions. And I cannot stress this enough. If you are the person that lets your knees come back in front of the bar in a deadlift after you pass your knee, that's another thing that can ruin your fucking open. How many people do we know that crush the open, but then have that specific weakness that's very simple physics, like foundational movement. But because once they get tired, their body's like, I got a trick for you. Let's squat this instead. Squatting's easier. And then you throw your knees out in front. You have no leverage over the bar and you can't move it. And you do the Dave Castro wiggle, 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 wiggle for who knows how long to get it to your hip. That's a problem. Especially a problem when they always put it with handstand push-ups and handstand walk and your back is like, yo, I'm good. Last but not least, we have non-mandatory work here. We have Sherb alluded to it before, we have the overhead squat in the thruster, and we are literally taking a rep scheme that you would see in a Metcon, and we are turning it into a strength session. 3x20 overhead squat, 3x20 thruster. And again, the same rules apply here to that higher rep work that we did or that you're going to do with the touch and go power only. You need to be able to go into it and say, yes, sometimes I can do this with 95. So week 1, it's 95 pounds. You smoke it, you cruise through it. The next week, you're seeing if you can do 105 or 115, whatever it is. Make sure that because we alternate weeks with this, that you start with something you know that you can do to set a baseline. Set a baseline for yourself that says, all right, I know that with as much rest as I want, that 3x20, I'd like to be able to do 135 by the end of this phase. That doesn't mean you start with 135 and, do the Froning thrusters where he holds it over his head for 6 minutes between each rep. Easy. Or you're pausing in all these different areas. Do not do that. If you suck at high rep overhead squat or high rep thruster, we got you covered, but please do not bite off more than you
when
can
you
chew.
Do those movements in the open, do you do them fast or do you do them slow?
Yes.
Yep.
The answer is probably fast. So the idea here is learning how to cycle these movements at game speed. That's what we're learning here. Where your feet go, where do your knees go, what do your positions look like? That is what we're trying to do, is that sport specific movement, so that when they throw out the 20 overhead squats with double unders and muscle ups, you're ready to rock because you know exactly where your body needs to be in space.
Yeah. I mean, that's kind of a perfect example of prepared and confident, right? Yep. I got this done, but I also made sure that I did it in a realm that could actually pop up in a workout. And man, if you had given me 5 rounds of 15 overhead squats at 115, in phase 8, I would have died. Now I got it covered. And if it pops up in the open, I'm going to be prepared, but maybe even more importantly, know in the back of your head that you can handle it if you want to grind. Yep. There's really I don't think there's a huge point in covering the skill, because during the open, most of the skill days are mandatory, and it's, you guessed it, toes to bar, chest to bar, bar muscle up, handstand walk, kipping, handstand push-ups. There's some nuance in there where, working with, some like lower deficit kipping, handstand push-ups so that the range of motion feels a little bit easier. But it's, very standard when it comes to that. What I think is more important and fun to end the episode is talking about the test specifically.
Good.
Grisabelle has been around for a while and hasn't necessarily fit, both because like programming can be a really, really annoying puzzle. It's like doing a puzzle blindfolded, can be very challenging, but then also when the hell is the damn open? Like we literally didn't even have one this year. So it's been there for a while and we've been really excited about it. And now it's here. We have 3 rounds, 10 clean and jerk unbroken, 10 power snatch unbroken, both at 135/95 pounds. So you're talking about doing 1/3 of Grace and 1/3 of Isabel unbroken 3 times in a row.
Oh my goodness.
You'll be all right.
You'll be all right. It's an exaggerated form of figuring out where you're at when it comes to things like this. Like it wouldn't be that surprising if, Castro posted the other day that the classic open workout's the one that's only snatches. This will help you very much to prepare both in being confident and actually doing the work itself. Next up, Sherby, is Equimini. And this workout...
Fuck, that's how you pronounce that bitch?
I wish you could have seen the way he spelled it. It was like Aqua Mini.
Aqua Mini.
It is Andre 3000 and Big Boy's signs mixed together.
What's the name of their rap group?
One of them's an Aquarius and one of them's a Gemini.
Aerosmith?
Fuck.
Do you know the answer?
No, I don't think he does. That's why I asked him.
No, I do know who Andre 3000 is.
What group is he in?
I don't fucking know.
I'm crying inside.
Ted, shut the podcast off.
We're playing that the rest of the day.
Oh
Blue
my goodness. All right. He did once ask us who Pharrell was. What is Equimini?
Right, Equimini. All right. So
yeah, it's a pair of shoulder pads that I wore in hockey.
Equimini is
Next question, idiots.
Our aerobic test for the upcoming phase.
Oh, this is special. We yelled at each other for at least an hour about the specifics of this workout.
Oh, yeah.
This is a good fight. This is beefcake. To me, my opinion, the perfect way to test someone, their aerobic engine and what they're able to do kind of back and forth. It's classic push-pull. It's the longer, time domain here. You're looking at a piece that'll take most athletes somewhere around that 20 to 26 minute mark if they're, in the right place for the workout. There is a cap to save you just in case. I'm not going to tell you what it is, but there is a cap. But
it's not that safe.
No. Essentially, you'll row for a period of time, then you'll get off the rower and you'll do some burpees. I'm not going to tell you how many, but there's a good dose.
Wow.
Good dose of burpees. Enough
like
where
it.
it's going to be a nuisance. It's not meant to be like
tease.
4 burpees. It's double digits, and it might be more than 10. I'll just put that out there. But the idea is once you get off the rower, can you move at a consistent pace, aka you've developed your aerobic engine, you've figured out the skill of being steady on your burpees to be able to get back on your rower and get ahead again so that you don't have to keep doing sets of burpees. To me, it feels a lot like rowing Kalsu. I know it's a little bit different interval, but
it's like the Air Force WOD if it was just rowing and burpees.
Exactly.
You're welcome.
So you're out in this scenario where you're trying to row at a aggressive pace, but you're not sending it so that you don't have to keep doing sets of burpees over and over again. You're figuring out what
Here's
is your
a question.
kind of
Do I get the freebie? Do I have to start with burpees or do I get to start with rowing?
Nah, you get a little bit of a freebie. Okay. So you get to get a good little chunk done ahead of time. And those of you who've been doing your aerobic work, you probably get a good chunk of it done.
But is it a freebie if you go too hard and then have to do that other thing?
Absolutely not.
No.
100%. This is one of those ones where if you teeter the line and you go a little bit over past that line, hey, you're in for a treat. You're in for a good, I don't know, we'll just call it a long treat with this piece. So to me, again, we are looking at developing the aerobic engine through movements that could theoretically show up in the opens, which is why we kind of paired it rowing and burpees. And if you look at like the Masters qualifier and a couple of things in the past, they like to put people in these scenarios where they're in that long, steady, just kind of grind back and forth. So to me, I think this has that mark perfectly. You're going to get that aerobic engine tested with some rowing and some burpees. Our
next test is a concept that, we use during a lot of sanctionals prep stuff. We use what we call a Metcon reset. So for our interval test in phase 9, you go into this workout looking at it as if it was an actual 18-minute AMRAP? Is this 18 minutes straight through? And what we did is we said, all right, we think we know where most people will break down. You get a minute rest in 2 of those spots. And the idea is, like, perfect example, sitting right here, looking at what these movements are. Sherb wants to get Hunter's score, but knows that he can't. We give him the rest to hope that if Hunter did this straight through, that Sherb could get the same score. And why this is important, again, is that hormetic response, that overreaching concept, this idea that if we never go there, if we never get the opportunity to accumulate that much intensity and that many reps, how are we ever going to be able to do that when it is straight through? So every single Wednesday, you're going to have a mandatory interval where we've gone in and taken open movements and taken what we would consider the style itself being more important than the movements. Like, so for instance, the Jimmy Sendricks experience is your interval test. It's got an 8-minute AMRAP, rest a minute, a 6-minute AMRAP, rest a minute, and a 4-minute AMRAP. 4 chest bar pull-ups, 6 thrusters, 8 box jump, all the way overs. Sort of a classic open type thing. We are guessing and sort of hoping for the progression of some all the way overs in the open. They are soul crushing compared to rebounding box jumps. They're, I don't know, like, how people do those burpees where they don't do the push-up, like they just throw their feet back and they're on the top of the plank. Like that's a box jump, and then a burpee is the box jump all the way over. Like you got to get the work done. You got to, sort of start over each time. So in this workout, you continue where you left off as you're going through, and you're really we know that there are so many people that crush the open other than the wall ball and row workout, other than the, thruster, toe to bar, double under workout. You need to be able, again, to understand that this workout is so much more about transitions and mindset than it is about going super hard within the movement itself. I'd say the one asterisk on that, because you do get to stop and start, would be the box jump all the way overs. But again, steady. Know your footwork for when you turn around, all that stuff. Obsess over that. So you, again, become very robotic in this workout, and you get, sort of what you get what your goal would be for a score if this was in the open.
Yeah.
Sort of, I'm going to progress over these next 9 weeks, so I'm going to crush this workout. And again, you're going to get an opportunity to do this with each style of workout. So it's not just, okay, we think that everyone's not good at those, long ones. Obviously, some people are great at it. So then the next week we're going to move into, a shorter couplet, and then a shorter triplet, and then back to a long one, but it's a couplet. So you're going to get opportunities throughout the phase to do this sort of thing where it is an interval, but it's sort of just like if you got to hit pause on your open workout, like, and be like, ooh, man, it's starting to get a little spicy. I'm going to take a breath here, gather myself, do that sort of thing. And I think people are going to prove to themselves what they're capable of, because a minute rest every once in a while it's nothing.
I mean, some people do it in workouts.
That could be true.
Nuisance rest.
I'm going to let Hunter take it away for 21A and B. I don't know if you're going to tease it. I don't know if you're going to give it away.
I'll give it away. I don't mind. Not going to help anybody. It's a good test. I don't think it's going to be one of those pieces where you're rolling around on the floor afterward. I think it is a test. So you've basically got a continuously running 19-minute clock, and you need to complete the Metcon before you're allowed to advance to the 1 rep max clean and jerk a la the open. So you kind of got to earn the right to lift heavy. We basically go 18 overhead squats, 95, 65, and 5 muscle ups. And we go 15 and 4, 12 and 3. We go all the way down until we're at 6 overhead squats and 1 muscle up. And then you got to climb back up the ladder, finishing with a set of overhead squats.
That's the Hunter twist.
Yeah, you said he doesn't do it. I think it's coming for sure. And also just like the climb the ladder style, but very, very manageable overall total volume of both movements, particularly for folks who are familiar with Misfit Athletics. We're in that sub 30 muscle up range and a few more overhead squats, but at a very manageable weight. So it's cool. Had Caroline and Austin go through a very similar version of it. We tweaked it a little bit to make it more manageable and basically allow athletes like that to really send it, to really rip through this, to kind of see where that threshold is. The kind of ascending muscle ups on the back half are a little bit of a nod to, did you do the right things going down the ladder? Because if you moved like a jackass in the first half of the workout, then that's when somebody's going to pass you in the back half. And a lot of the skill work with muscle ups is kind of playing to that descending or ascending style of rep scheme, just to get athletes comfortable with that idea. So you finish the Metcon, and then with whatever time you have left, you're going over to that 1 rep max clean and jerk. And I think it's more than enough time. I think athletes will find that you have enough time. Always a good idea to probably warm up that clean and jerk to that 80% range, something like that is what we would probably usually write for a primer. Have that set up, and then be prepared to adjust your plan to the left or to the right a little bit. But just classic standard open workout, manageable weight, manageable rep scheme. How fast can you go? You are going to get limited probably just by the muscle up there, and that's intentional. That's kind of the roadblock, and the fittest folks are going to be able to blast through that and see what they can sling for a weight when they're tired, which is our sport. So I think the one kind of thing that I would add here is that, yes, in the subsequent 5 weeks of training, you are going to do clean and jerk percentage work. You need to really think about what number you're using for that percentage work. Are you using your that 1 rep max clean and jerk when the music's blasting, you're feeling good, like it's Monday, it's test week?
You mean from July 2016?
Right,
Nationals
correct. Yeah. Are you using that? Are you using that 1 rep max clean and jerk to then attack your percentage work that's under fatigue, or are you using the 1 rep max clean and jerk that you found after you got waxed by some overhead squats and muscle ups? And historically I would say use the 1 rep max from the test, but I understand that some people, maybe some people have their best day ever and they sling something maybe out of their league, and then their percentage work for the next 5 weeks puts them in a grave and just is debilitating. Or you get an accurate representation of your ability to lift while you're under fatigue, and it's significantly lower. And in that case, I would say maybe that's the number that you need to use for your percentage work, because as we go through the 5 weeks of the phase, what we're not looking for is garbage triples, doubles, and singles.
If there's a chance you're going to miss it, you're doing it wrong. And that applies to just about every lifting session that you have.
Adrenaline's a hell of a drug, right? You might get in week 1, be fired up at the new phase, crush a new PR, but then you get to your percentage work and you can't sling it. Like you put after another.
The goal
Metcon.
is to move consistently under fatigue.
Our biggest way to push the needle with someone in the open, both within a Metcon and kind of testing out these things, is getting really comfortable and really proficient at like 80% or 70%, like those triple and double numbers, because those then lead to a heavy single later on. If you go into those movements and you aren't moving cleanly, they're not going to translate to your conditioning, where you have to be able to do them over and over and over again and repeat them, nor they translate down the road when it matters, where, hey, I want to figure out what you can do at the very end of this 15-minute AMRAP. So again, I do typically say, like, try to use something recent, but again, it's okay to temper down 5 or 10% or 5 or 10 pounds to be like, it's more about getting better at this thing than it is just about, did I stick to the number that they said on the website?
The mentality should be, especially if you hit a lower 1 rep max clean and jerk than maybe your historical best, which is certainly reasonable, is to almost consider it as 2 different lifts, or consider it as like a training max or something like that. We talk about that all the time. If you're, test that 1 rep max and it's through the roof, the stars aligned, and then the percentage work is impossible, well, like, use a training max, which is 90% ish of what you hit for that true 1 rep max. But again, if you're moving poorly, then you're just not setting yourself up for success when there is a heavy barbell, whether it's a 1 rep max after a bunch of gymnastics and other movements, or if it's that kind of ascending heavy barbell that we see so often in the open. Like, both are applicable, but you can almost think of them as 2 different 1 rep maxes.
Right. I love this test because you can almost split up the open in like a very narrow-minded way, but you can split up the open into like workouts where, because athletes always, when they're nervous, always want strategy, right? So like, you have your workouts where strategy is literally like, lol, are you kidding? You're asking me for strategy? Right. You keep moving literally the entire time. That's the strategy. But then there are the workouts, the 21-15-9s with the handstand push-ups, the shorter workouts, the ones where it's dangerous to go too hard, maybe at the beginning, those sort of weird, maybe 7-8 minute workouts, things like that. So you have both of those bases covered in test and retest week, and there's a reason for that, right? So yes, the interval, the 18-minute AMRAP interval it's the LOL. It's what do you mean? What do you do?
Yeah,
you
don't stop moving.
You do that literally
minutes.
for the entire time, and mentally try to keep yourself in a place where you can continue to transition quickly, but then be methodical in your movement. But in this workout, going down and up a ladder, that is in the spirit of the open, no matter whether it pops up or not, because you need a lot of strategy and information about yourself to, again, when we start to obsess over how many seconds or how many reps you're getting, that sort of thing is going to matter in this type of workout.
And they'll intentionally try to throw you monkey wrenches like this in the open. So one of the reasons we're putting it into the training is that, you might be great if it was always descending, but what happens if it does start to ascend? We need to train for that so that we know what our body is capable of when we're super tired. What do our sets of 7 muscle ups turn into when it's 10 minutes in and it's something else grip related? Like that is the type of information we're trying to glean from this. And, the way we do that is by putting us through these experiences. So for me, like you look at that work, you're like, oh, I was feeling great until the muscle ups started to creep back up. Well, what does that tell you about your muscle ups? Maybe your turnover's garbage, or you don't kip your dip, or maybe you don't do overhead squats very well and they mess up your muscle ups. There's so much to learn there. And, some of these workouts might be like, what the fuck's wrong with those guys? They're just trying to screw me up. And the idea is, no, we're trying to teach. Well, yeah. Yes. And we're trying to teach you something. That's the ultimate goal here, is learning something from the training piece.
All right, Sherby, last but not least, the gauntlet. What is the gauntlet?
So excited about this. You think about the open, and you think about all the bitch work that you do out the rest of the year. You got skier, you got C2 bike, you got assault runner. You just have things that probably aren't going to show up in the open, right? They're just not going to. But as we alluded to earlier, there are also these movements that, like, it's a goddamn shame. You have a great clean and jerk. You can do toes to bar all day, but you just can't move in some of these more basic things. So when I wrote this, I was trying to think, what is a kind of uncomfortable dose of each thing? What would be like, something I should be able to do at a pretty good clip? And because it's the anaerobic test, we're going to rash it up just a little bit further. So you're going to notice that you're going to go through a good chunk of rowing, somewhere in the neighborhood of about 2 minutes of rowing, then about a minute of double unders, then a minute of some burpees, maybe a little bit longer if you're like me and slow. And then the test truly
Don't
begins.
say burpees when it's lateral burpee box jump on your shirt. That is so rude.
If it says burpee, it's just a burpee to me. They're all the same, but they are burpee box jump overs. But the last thing here is the part that I'm most excited about, is the grittiness factor at the very end of this 6-minute AMRAP. So again, you go through rowing, jump rope, burpees, and then you'll probably have somewhere in the neighborhood of 2 minutes, maybe 90 seconds to just grind through a max set of wall balls. And a great example of this was the 55s from a few years back, where the best of the best were able to get through a full round, and most of them got back to the wall balls, and they had like this really terrible amount of time, like 40 seconds, completely gassed.
Can you weekend at Bernie wall balls for a minute? like you're not there. You're gone. Bye-bye. See you later. But are you going to pick it up anyways?
Weekend at Sherby's.
Weekend
that
at
should have been the name of the workout.
But what's great about this piece is, can you learn that the jump rope, the wall bar are certain movements that you can kind of breathe and move through. And yes, they get really terrible, but they get to a point, and they kind of just stay the same the rest of the way. I think Caroline actually explained this the other day really well to a member. I heard her talking about wall sits, and she had done like a 75-hour wall sit with 400 plates in her lap. Like, she did some crazy amount, but she was talking to someone. She goes, after a few minutes, like, it burns, but it doesn't really get that much worse. It kind of just stays the same place. That's exactly what this workout is at the end. Like, the wall balls are going to be very uncomfortable. Can you tell yourself to stay calm, stay focused at the task at hand, and just dig deep for that small amount of time? Because we all know what it looks like at the end of a Metcon. We think of like the 16.5, the thrusters and bar facing burpees. Like, everybody starts to send the 963 burpees at the end when they have a chance at something on the line, right? You learn something there. There's that light at the end of the tunnel. That is exactly what happens here. You have the light at the end of the tunnel, and can you dig deep for those last 90 seconds? Just tough it out. And there's so much to learn here because so many athletes quit before their body actually quits. Their mind's like, yeah, this sucks. I don't want to do it anymore. You can learn a lot.
20-pound air squat.
Exactly. How many air squats could you do? I mean, how much you hug the medicine ball? How many times have you squatted?
I don't know.
A trillion, right?
15.
But just the movement being thrown up in the air, the variables there, just creates a scenario where you're like, want to give in.
Sadness.
I don't want you to. That's what this piece is for. Don't give in.
I mean, you can't downplay the importance of knowing deep down that you're willing to be reckless. You can't downplay that because, again, if you are more prepared than someone else and your movements are more efficient and you beat them to the wall ball and then they just like, but only by a little, and they have this grin on their face, they're like, I'm not dropping it. There's no way I'm dropping it. I might die. Might have to call the paramedics, but I'm not dropping this wall ball unless it drops me specifically.
I'm not fucking leaving.
Like that person, that person needs to live somewhere in your psyche. And you don't bring them out to play every single day. Like that's gonna be overreaching to the point where it's a serious problem.
You're dead.
But there are these moments where you have to go there to like, it's almost like you wrote the sentence and didn't put a period on it. Like you can't put in all of that work and then drop the wall ball with 15 seconds left. If that caused you to not qualify for a sanctional because you dropped the wall ball and you had to think about that for an entire year,
God,
that
net
would
installation.
not be that fun, right? So, we talk about things that you need to learn, and some of it is, how long do you stay in the hip extension before you turn over in the rings? But I would much rather have someone know, like, am I willing to go there? I do it every once in a while in training. Like I remember the first time that I realized that your body lies to you was on the old school Airdyne, because you go hard, but then immediately like there's this combination of I can't breathe and my legs hurt. That was what was so special about those things, other than the fact that they broke every time Sherb got on one. But like the first time you push through that and realize it's your choice, it's like, oh boy, I have so much more on the table in these scenarios than I thought I did. Because at first you really do believe it. Your body's telling you, you're done. Stop it. What are you doing? And you need, again, to have that person living somewhere deep down buried in there that's like, nah, I ain't listening to you. What the fuck do you know?
Yeah, I don't have anything to add there other than the fact that I just love a test that has a grittiness factor to it. I love where you get to make the choice for yourself. Like, I don't think anyone's going to throw an air ball up maybe more than once and airball it and be like, oh, it's a no rep. But like for the most part, aren't going to fail a 20-pound or a 14-pound
I'm counting that shit.
But can you teach yourself just keep doing it and keep doing it and keep doing it and just wait for nothing more than the sweet sound of that buzzer? Like, just don't drop it. And at the end, you've overreached, you figured out what that number is, and then you get an opportunity later on to say, all right, well, I trained this for the last 6 weeks through some things that are incorporating traditional bitch work and some more CrossFit bitch work. How much does that move the needle? And then your goal going back into it is seeing if you can get a little extra time there because you were tough in week 1 to try to give yourself a few more seconds so that you get 2 or 3 more wall balls. And that to me is a victory, because a lot of people are going to do this workout a second time and be like, I only got like 1 more. And like, that's huge. That's 3 seconds. But like that type of thing gets lost on a lot of people. It's one.
I just want one of the 2 times for them to be tougher than they've ever been. To me, that's a victory.
Same.
Because then you know, like, all right, fine.
All right,
I guess I could do that. When everyone in your gym, there's like 19 seconds left and you just sent it on the rower and they're like, go to the wall. And you're like, no, but I literally can't walk.
So you chalk your hands for those handstand push-ups.
Yes. All right. It's full circle time. We've talked about a lot. We've talked about maybe how to set yourself up planning wise, mentally, physically. We talked about specifics. Full circle. What advice do we have for people going into phase 9?
My advice is buy in. The biggest thing here, and the way we get this next 7 weeks to work for you when it comes time, the time when you really care about those really challenging 5 weeks, is creating buy-in early. Create the behavior now. Don't get to the open and go, fuck, you know what? I should have practiced setting my camera up and finding a judge and knowing where I should be in the gym. Like, practice that stuff now. Buy into it. And if you really do buy in it and you believe that you're getting better, you are going to get better, because that positive mindset begets further adaptation and further positivity, which is going to help you grow as an athlete, versus going, yeah, they had some stuff that was kind of cool and I did a clean jerk and one workout on a random Wednesday. It was after the workout. Great. What can you learn from this? And to me, that starts with buy-in. You have to buy into this stuff.
I'm a big fan, especially when it comes to the open, of mental preparation and sort of working through the various scenarios that you're going to be presented with, both the positive and the negative ones. And I kind of alluded to it earlier, and that's when you're controlling the things you can, when you're kind of planning ahead, thinking about the layout of where I'm gonna do these open simulation workouts every Friday, who my judge is going to be, and then taking it a step further and saying, okay, what happens? Like I'm getting like, what if my judge throws me 5 no reps? Like, hey,
what if Hunter's my judge?
Yeah, what if Hunter's my judge and he's holding you to the standard? Sure, what, like, give me 5 no reps somewhere in this workout, and it's the last 5 reps of the workout, and you're just like, no, fuck, what the fuck? If that is the mindset, then you need to change that. Fuck. Or similarly, okay, what happens when my jump rope breaks? What happens when my grips literally explode off the pull-up bar? Am I going to cry? Do I have another set? What does it matter? Those sorts of things. I really like just kind of expect and plan for the worst and hope for the best, so to speak. So when those things do happen, you're mentally prepared. You've been there. You've at least thought about it. It doesn't catch you off guard. The difference between that and somebody who doesn't, someone who freaks out because their grips aren't working, they rip their hand or something like that. That's the difference in a 50, 100 spots.
For me, one of the ways to look at it is to like know your enemies. Like when you're looking at this stuff, let's talk about what's the inverse here. Okay. This is not the time of the year where I can just wing it. So when I look at that and I know that that's my enemy, that if I just do a bunch of random shit and I have no plan, that it's probably not going to set me up to succeed, that's when I can buy into routine. That's when I can buy into, I'm going to work on this, this, and this. Here are the things that I want. You know, we talked about that hierarchy, the basics, then the open skills, then the energy system manipulation. You need to check off all 3 every single week, but which one are you going to put a little bit more eggs into the basket? Talk about coming full circle on that analogy.
Who's eggs?
Fuck. What are you baking?
Second guessing would be another enemy, right? So right there in the middle between what I just said and what I'm going to say next is second guessing, just this idea of, am I doing enough? Is this right? Should I try this instead? Once you have established that plan, you need to stick to it. Like we said, ups and downs are built into this. It's kind of the point. And last but not least is insecurity. Like, insecurity is your enemy. You have 10 more weeks to figure this out and get yourself in a headspace where there's no way that you are going to perform better than you can possibly perform, right? We can't put unnecessary expectations on ourselves. And when we know that we can just go in and execute. Just go in and give the best effort that you have. And if you did prepare well throughout the entire thing, you are going to be ready. So know your enemies and keep them in the forefront of your mind and say, I'm just not going there. I'm not going to allow myself to think in these ways. And that can go a long ways.
Agreed.
Yep. All right, ladies and gents, that was the Phase 9 Open Prep Podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in. And thank you again to our show sponsors, Sharpen the Axe. Head to sharpentheaxeco.com. Use the code word unprepared, or you can use the word Keala, Keala, and donate 10% of your order to the Keala Foundation. PureSpectrumCBD.com. Use the code word Misfit. Properfuel.co. Use the code word Misfit to save on your very first order. And as always, I am at Misfit Coach on Instagram. Slide into those DMs. Let me know what you thought of the episode and what you'd like to hear next.